Tonight we're going to be talking about climate science and climate politics. So happy to have Jill Cody. Jill, welcome.
Thank you.
And Dr. Rick Nolthenius. Something to offer? Any advances in carbon neutrality or carbon-free energy being produced or generated?
Oh, that's a great question, Steve. So if you look at the decarbonization of global energy, we actually were making progress during the 20th century. So people might be surprised and think, oh, the 20th century, that dirty industrial age, probably things were getting worse, and now we're heading towards clean energy and solar and wind, and I'll bet that now we're decarbonizing. We've bent the curve, and now it's just the opposite.
Really?
We were actually doing better at decarbonization in the 20th century as we had all those prime sites for hydroelectric power, and we're building nuclear reactors. Now, we're not building nuclear. Nuclear is kind of in decline, and all the best hydro sites have been built. And while solar and wind are coming up, they're still so tiny.
Right.
Frankly, the growth rate, they're barely keeping up with the growth rate in emissions from carbon. So during the 21st century, we've actually not improved at all. So if you look at the curve, I'll try and do this for camera, so you got to go backwards. So we were decarbonizing during the 20th century, and then we took a blip up when China decided, you know what, we're kind of done with this great leap forward. Let's embrace capitalism in our own way. They're still communists, but they've embraced free market. Well, not free market, but a market economy.
A market economy.
Okay. So it took a little blip up, and then since then it's kind of bounced around all through this. The entire 19 years, we have not made any progress at all in the decarbonization of our energy.
We're talking about climate science and climate politics, but there's also an economic aspect to climate change as well.
Yeah, the problem is that economically we are built to growth. So this is where I'm, I think, helping to fill in some from, great proofs normally start from two directions. You get the observational side, and then you get the theoretical side.
Right.
And often those two are wide apart, and you try and say, well, do these really connect? Can we really make all the dots to give us this as a mathematical proof, for example? So I'm thinking of some of the great conjectures that have been proven, and they take tomes of paper to do.
That's right.
So I think of the Garrett relation as kind of in that boat at the moment. He doesn't want to think about people as this flesh and blood squishy thing. Yeah. It's just like, no, it's a physics system, it's all deterministic, and this is the way it's going to play out. I would like to not be quite that negative and say, no, we could change, but how could we? And so I'm trying to fill in. So what is it that makes this relationship true? We want to grow. And that's our downfall.
Interesting.
We want to grow. And you may think, well, but look at all these great people who are trying to make a world that's sustainable, and we're not going to grow so much. But you know what? I'll bet you don't take any of your savings that you generate from wherever and put a match to them. I don't either. And even a good progressive who has excess money and gives it to a worthy cause, maybe food, not bombs, or whatever. You know what? That's going to get spent too. Yeah. And all spending in the Garrett relation contributes to future power needs. You encumber the necessity to power what you have created. All civilization is a fight against the second law of thermodynamics of decay. And so we have to spend, even if GDP were zero, even if we weren't progressing at all, we would still need new access to new power. And so solving climate is far more difficult than people think.
And is there, in your view, enough evidence-based statistics that are built up around the need to do certain things to reduce the carbon footprint? Is that being generated? And there's the academic side, and there's the kind of activist, philosophical, revolutionary side, but the two kind of have to work together in order to find a solution.
Are we making progress in that? No.
That's the short answer. Yeah.
And my answer is one reason why I wrote the book. Is that this book is for people that are waking up to the problem and say, well, what can I do?
Right.
What can I do? And there are things that you can do. Rick and I disagree a little bit about the politics of it, but I'm a little more hopeful.
Optimistic.
Yeah,
I'm more optimistic than Tim Garrett. He's more optimistic than
on a scale. But this was written for that person in mind that is waking up but doesn't know enough about it and wants to learn more. And so there's a variety of chapters from archaeology to the oceans and ice and extreme weather to sports. I mean, the sports is going to be significantly affected by the climate crisis and already is.
Well, give us an example now.
Well,
That's fascinating.
one example is that baseball has, since when the game was invented, had a very favorite tree, an ash tree in the Adirondack Mountains, and that was a special hardwood to make their bats out of. However, already the emerald borer beetle is moving, changing its territory farther north, and has gotten into the Adirondacks and is attacking that ash tree to the point now that they're saving those seeds. And baseball won't have the tree that made the bat from the beginning of time of the game. Olympics are already worried about snow in the winter and too much heat in the summer with the running, with people doing running. Tennis games in Australia have had to be called off for a while because the heat was too much.
That's interesting.
So there are a lot of stories in the sports chapter like that.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about one of the approaches that you hear often as our solution to the climate problem. Yeah. So increasing energy efficiency is said to be the path. This is going to be our path. We just need to be more efficient.
Well, it's certainly a buzz phrase. I mean, you hear that.
It's a buzz phrase. You hear it a lot. If
hear it all the time.
I mean, in my chapter, I list some of the things that you hear all the time. If only we could replace all of our light bulbs with LED bulbs.
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
Mileage standards and so forth and so on. Unfortunately, those are neglecting a key aspect of the way we work as a civilization. And it is what I call, not Jevons paradox, but the generalized Jevons paradox. So it's a more explicitly thermodynamic look at Jevons paradox. So let me explain what Jevons paradox is. So William Stanley Jevons was an energy economist back 150 years ago and observed that more efficient steam engines would not lessen the amount of coal that was needed, but would in fact increase the amount of coal that was needed.
That's a little counterintuitive, huh?
A little counterintuitive, but now he was correct. One thing, though, that people will say is, well, that's just because he was talking about coal, which was so much at the base of all things industrial. But it doesn't apply. Jevons paradox only gets a little bit of rebound. This is what you'll hear from the economists. So, for example, if you double the mileage of your car, you're not going to go out and drive twice as many miles.
No, probably not.
And that's perfectly true. So this is where the generalized aspect comes in. So generalized Jevons paradox says that you will generate savings with those increased efficiencies. And you are not going to throw those savings away. You're not going to destroy the ability created by those savings to expand civilization further. And all spending encumbers future power to power. That's the problem.
Interesting.
So generalized Jevons paradox. Let me just go ahead and read it because
please.
You kind of wordsmith these things when you're doing a book and trying to come up with a whole new.
This is the product of that wordsmithing, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, of course, Jill gave me a word count.
And I gave him a word count, and we revised,
I'm
make
familiar
more
with word
concise, more concise.
No, please go ahead.
Any increase in energy efficiency will lead to savings. Those savings will not be destroyed, but rather they will be spent. And the Garrett relation shows that all spending requires ongoing consumption of new energy to support the resulting civilizing against decay, while also expanding our ability to discover and exploit new energy resources. These combined effects more than offset the efficiency gained reductions in power. So that future global power consumption goes up, not down. And when you actually look at the real data, it's verified to be true.
Is that right?
And it has to do with we want to grow as fast as we can. It also has to do with how people will say, well, we just need to convert to solar and wind and then everything will be great. But in fact, what we're doing is we're just adding that to the portfolio of all the energy. Energy is everything. This is another very shorthand way to sum up my chapter. Energy is everything. It's another great insight actually from Tim Garrett was that the value in economics is not in stuff. It's not in capital and labor. No, it's in energy. It's in the networks that connect people and connect people to things and to each other. Without energy, powering the motion along those networks, and you can be as general as you want, electricity or fluids or people and trains and so forth. Without power to allow those networks to do what they do, there's no value.
Right.
Unplug everything, and civilization is valueless. We all die, and things just sit there and decay.
And this is included in the chapter that you're talking about in your book. And I know you have several passages kind of earmarked here. We'd love to hear a little bit more from your book.
Okay, thank
if
you.
you wouldn't mind.
Well, before our break, we were talking about how Rick and I kind of disagree a little bit. And at the end of
Say
each
it ain't
chapter,
so.
Say it ain't so.
Creative disagreements. I hope she's right.
Yeah, he does hope I'm
Okay,
right.
all
So, and at the end of each chapter, what was a organization development tool called a Keep, Stop, Start.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also an organization development facilitator for many years. It took me to Iceland and Egypt and
My goodness, yeah.
the Czech Republic, and that was a whole nother life. But the tool that I like so much, which is simple and powerful, is at the end of each chapter. So when people say, what can I do about it? At the end of the chapter, whatever topic it was, sports or eco-restoration, or that author has what they suggested from their expert opinion, what the reader can keep doing, stop doing, and start doing. So there's actually an action plan at the end of each chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one reason that I think this book is different than other books about climate change.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there isn't an anthology like this out there.
Right.
Bill McKimmett did one for his 350.org organization many years ago.
Right.
So people learn by stories, and everybody has their own story, and wrote that for the book. So it's stories and facts. For example, the gentleman in India, Raj Pujan, he goes to the Arctic a lot, and for the first time he saw a polar bear jail. There are jails made for polar bears now. And the reason for that is they can't survive, they can't find the food they need where they live, and they're coming into the towns, going through the garbage cans like bears do, and
Right. Of course,
we have
yeah.
here in California. And so they catch them and they put them in a polar bear jail and just feed them snow, because they don't feed them food because they don't want them to think they can get food in that town.
Right.
And then they truck them back up in the Arctic far away. And so, so that was a story that gripped me when I first read
Yeah, I
that
should say.
chapter,
Yeah.
because I didn't know about the polar bear jails. So one thing that in the preface I titled is Too Hot for Coffee,
Mm-hmm.
because coffee needs cooler climates. And I thought, well, to get people's attention, because it's such an overwhelming topic, and no one really knows where to start with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, if someone realized they're going to lose their morning cup of coffee, maybe they go, wait a minute. Maybe
That
I
would
should
get my
act.
attention.
That would get your
Yeah.
attention. So it is getting too hot for coffee, and I'll just read a little bit from
Please.
that. Coffee is not ready to adapt to climate change without help, said Doug Welsh, Pete's Coffee, Vice President and Roast Master. Climate scientists are now saying that few coffee-growing regions will be spared the effects of climate change. It is literally becoming too hot for coffee. As Starbucks founder Howard Schultz stated, make no mistake, climate change is going to play a bigger role in affecting the quality and integrity of coffee. The future loss of coffee is such a serious business issue to Starbucks that in 2013, the company bought a 600-acre plot in Costa Rica that is now a field laboratory and testing facility to analyze the threats of climate change to Starbucks business. The threats are real. Coffee plants need to be grown in colder regions. As global temperatures have been rising, farmers have been moving their growing areas higher up the mountain. This is a big book. It's heavy. Searching for a cooler temperature. Colombian leaders see their livelihoods of their 300,000 coffee producers endangered. When asked in August 2018, 90% of Colombia's coffee farmers said that they have already seen in the average temperature and the changes in flowering and fruiting cycles of their coffee crops. And there are other crops that we're going to be losing. Strawberries Strawberries is one, and the Salinas Valley grows a lot of strawberries. So
Well, we
that's,
grow a lot of strawberries here
So
in
we're
Santa Cruz
losing-
County.
yes.
Absolutely, yes, we do.
we're losing via temperature increases that favor pests and diseases, and by ocean acidification. Anchovies, apples, avocados, bananas, beans, beer, blue crab, cherries, chicken, chickpeas, chocolate, cod, corn, cranberries, honey, lobsters, maple syrup, oysters, peaches, peanuts, potatoes, pumpkin, rice, sardines, scallops, shrimp, soybeans, strawberries, turkey, and wine.
Aha.
Wine.
Yes.
So, do you hear anything you like on that, Steve? That
Well,
list
I
there?
see here a couple of items
Yes.
that maybe would find their way onto my diet.
So, one thing that the Yale has a climate communications program,
Mhm.
and one thing that they mention is that we have to take the spiral of silence off of climate crisis. We need to start talking about it, and thank you to you and the program, because we need to start talking about this more in our
Absolutely,
everyday life. At our when we eat, at our dinner tables, with our friends, wherever we go. I try to bring it up somehow, because we need to make it an everyday topic, so that people start realizing, whoa, I need to start focus on this, think about what I can do about it, and start acting. One of the issues that we have in California is we live in a state that is very aware of what's happening with the drought we had, with the wildfires that we've had.
And
We're
indeed
really-
has passed legislation in response
Passed
to some of
legislation.
these crises.
And
Sure.
yet we have states that are doing nothing.
Yeah.
And so there are programs, there are nonprofits like Flippable
Right.
and Flip the Senate, where we as Californians need to help other people in the red states to be able to make changes in their, you were talking about politics.
Yes.
Really, politics is getting in the way of making any huge changes in this area. So we need to start helping people in other states make changes in their state legislature.
Correct.
Yeah, so one of the problems that you just
And thank
mentioned
you for
a
that. That's
moment,
wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a great study that was done by Gillens and Page, Northwestern and Princeton researchers, and looked at 20 years worth of data, every legislative bill introduced to Congress for passage or not passage.
1,771 bills, to be exact.
Right. And so this was over both Democratic and Republican administrations and Congresses, both, and they correlated those with the desires of 4 different groups. The average citizen, that's you and me, our mass-based lobbies, so that might include things like the Sierra Club or
Right.
Citizens Climate Lobby, but mass-based lobbies, then business lobbies, and then finally the economic elites. Now, what
The
do you-
1%?
They didn't quantify. It
They
was
didn't
anybody,
quantify it, but it was
they
the
didn't quantify it
oligarch
as
level.
percent,
Yeah,
but,
okay. Yeah, I don't.
people making over 100,000 a year.
Okay.
So now you want to ask, what was the correlation between what bills were passed and what people actually wanted? So the way they calibrated this was so I've got to be careful about this, because there was a criticism that was published later, but it's bogus.
Yeah.
The criticism was, oh, well, this is, misleading. No, what they said exactly what they're doing, and that is they're trying to measure the independent influence of these different groups on affecting legislation, because that's what we care about.
That the average citizen wanted.
Well, the average citizen correlated with what laws were passed. The correlation coefficient was 0.
Really?
Yeah, there was no correlation whatsoever. Whether you hated it or whether you loved the bill made no difference in whether it was passed or not. What do you suppose the correlation coefficient was for the economic elite?
Quite a bit higher?
So 100% would be
100%.
perfect.
100%?
Well, wait a minute. That would be if it was perfect. It's
Right.
almost, though.
Yeah.
78%.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
78%. And the other groups were somewhere in between. But mass-based lobbies even, there were not much above 0. It's very
Interesting.
ineffective. The Congress and the president, they don't care about what we want.
And this study was done before Citizens United.
Yeah.
And the Citizens United
Yes.
Supreme Court decision gave more power to corporations, and
So if they updated this,
Yeah.
it would probably be worse.
it'd be worse.
And I do understand what you're talking about in terms of Citizens United. I'm on the local board for the ACLU, and our stance is, of course, we do not like the ruling of Citizens United, but the national ACLU has been in favor of it since the decision came down, so it's kind of an odd differentiation. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What, are you
Yeah.
sure?
Yep, absolutely positively. Yeah, it's one of-
ACLU is in favor
In
of
favor of
Citizens
the
United?
Citizens
yes, indeed, the national
I
is
did
in
not know
favor.
that.
Yeah.
Now I
And
wonder
we've
if
had
the
quite a
AC
bit of conflict between the local and regional chapters.
That's
and,
stunning.
Yeah, it is stunning.
has the national ACLU been captured?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
our departments in the
Yeah.
federal government, they've all
Yeah.
been captured
Yeah.
by their corresponding industry. I
Mhm.
mean, the lobbyists are running the
Yeah.
EPA, and the lobbyists are running the.
But what, in your view, really, as not only informed folks in this area, but also an activist in your own way, for that?
You know,
What is the impediment to actually getting something,
Okay.
some significant change?
I have something to
moving?
say about
Yeah,
it. So,
that's why we invited you, because you have
Yes,
something to
I
say
know,
about it.
This
If
might be
you're
the
wondering.
area where
Yeah.
we disagree a little bit.
Okay, well,
climate is unlike any other
Yeah.
environmental or social problem that we've ever attacked.
mhm.
There is no local connection, really.
Hmm.
Only if it somehow catches fire and turns global will it actually affect climate. CO2 is a so-called well-mixed greenhouse gas. All of them are, methane and so forth,
Mhm.
nitrous oxides. They mix globally within weeks after they're emitted. So
Mhm.
my CO2 becomes everybody's CO2 in a
Right.
very short time. Even the U.S. You know how much of the global emissions of CO2 is coming from the U.S. right now?
25%? 20, 10, 15, 5, 2?
13.7.
Is that right? I thought it was more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be more long
Yeah.
ago. But China
Has
is
got-
taking
and
over.
India.
Asia,
Yeah.
India. So Asia's growing like a weed.
I mean, globally, that's what they call the theory of differentiated responsibilities. The people who create the problem should have the most effect in solving
I don't know
the
if it's a
problem.
theory, but it's certainly an actuality. It's certainly an actuality.
Steve's theory.
Yeah, it's a differentiated responsibility, so we'll throw that on the table. But anyway,
Yeah. So again, I was invited to a salon actually up at the home of Ann Ehrlich,
Mhm.
Paul Ehrlich's wife up in Berkeley.
Happy time.
About 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Join with other academics and try and brainstorm.
Mhm.
What are we going to do? And this was after a great talk by Nate Hagens, who somebody else. If you don't know the work of Nate Hagens, you can find him on YouTube. He gives great talks. He's another one of these few people who's doing great synthesis between economics. He worked in hedge funds for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Politics, energy economics, especially, that was his specialty.
Right.
And we couldn't come up with a solution. We can make little changes here and there,
Mm-hmm.
but how do you change things? I mean, this is why I think what you need to do is you need to go to Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
with 100,000 to 1 million people,
All right. Yeah.
non-violently.
Mhm.
So I know
Yeah.
the NSA is watching, and
Yeah.
I want to say I've never participated in violence. I have no interest in it. It doesn't even tempt me. Non-violently, but you need to go with the intention that you're not going to. This is not a little weekend march,
Right.
where you're just going to wait it out and
Mhm.
then we'll quietly disappear. You can't disappear 100,000 to 1 million
No, you
people,
can't.
and we ain't going home
Mhm.
until you pass these. Until you pass these, and I have a list of legislative demands
Mhm.
and initiatives that should be done.
Well, and I think that's
in that
really what
chapter.
you need, and I appreciate what you were talking about earlier about the model that you use for your book. I do quite a bit of public speaking, and one of the things that I try to inject at the end of anything that I'm talking about, a particular issue, is a call to action. Some way for people to get who are committed to the cause, they believe in what you're saying. How do they get involved? How do they really march to that, drummer? How do they get to Washington?
If you get governments afraid enough that this is going to spread to their lands,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you could actually make things happen.
Yeah.
I think the
But
one
we have to do things that are painful. This is
Painful.
the big problem. We only want to do things that are
Revolutionary and painful?
fun. I got a great statistic for you.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a recent Gallup poll,
Mm-hmm.
and actually there's two different. There's a Gallup poll looking at environmentalism. How
Mhm.
many people identify as environmentalists? It's a very consistently asked question. That's one thing you have to be careful of with
Mhm.
these distance over time
Right.
polls.
Yeah.
In 1990, that was 77%. People identified themselves. You know what it is today?
I would
42%.
I was going to say lower, certainly.
It's
but
a
wow.
lot lower.
Wow.
So people are thinking, oh, I see a new
So
age
what is
coming,
what is the root cause of that? Are they they're frustrated? They're giving up. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to get involved. they
I
don't
think-
believe that there's any
I
change
think
possible.
it has a lot to do with the fact that after Reagan, we changed the laws in such a way that the wealth inequality is just going.
Well, the disparity is
deep.
certainly shocking.
Yes,
yeah.
and so
Yeah,
people
dramatic, to say
can't.
the least.
They need money
Yeah.
to keep their head above
And this
water.
is also
And
the
so,
economics of climate.
yeah. So
Sure.
hey, if the environment has to go, well then hey, here was a statistic I wanted to mention before
Please.
I lose it.
Yep.
I know you have a lot to say too. But so this great statistic found that 70% of Americans believe that climate change is real, it's human caused, and they are concerned for their family.
In their local
That's
community.
way above where it used to be
Mhm.
10, 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's good.
They're
the bad-
personalizing it. Yeah.
Here's the bad part. 70% also refuse to pay even $10 a month to do anything about it. And 40% won't even pay $1 a month. So as I illustrated in one of my talks, with a great big burrito, people won't pay one burrito's worth per month to do anything about something that is a concern for their family. Now,
We got about 2 more minutes, so
Well, then
please
this is-
sum up
I think
for
this
you
is
and
a
Joe.
key point
Please.
in the destructiveness of what happened with the climate crisis, and that is that it became tribal. In the beginning, it's science.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be partisan. This is happening to all of us, whether
Right.
you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent
Right.
or Green Party or Libertarian. It doesn't matter.
This has been a fascinating hour. Thank you so much for being here. Read Joel Cody's book.
I'll just talk.
Please hold it up. Climate Abandoned. And take Rick's class. If you have an
my
interest
class,
in
and
this,
frankly, all of my
Yeah.
PowerPoints are freely available to everyone.
because there's so much to know and really so many ways to be engaged and involved. And we won't take Guy McPherson's pessimistic view of climate change and our future. We'll take Rick
We're not there
Nolthenius'
yet.
the clarion call to do what we can to make it better. Rick, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure to see you. Joe, a
Thank
great
you, Steve.
pleasure, and hope
Nice
to see you
meeting
at K-Squid.
Thank you. At
And
K-Squid,
tune in to her
KSQD.
show. Again, thank you so much for being here on Voice from the Village. This has been a great hour. If you really want to get involved with something that really affects and impacts us all here in Santa Cruz County, climate change is a wonderful way to go. We will see you in next month, where we'll have another show on issues that are confronting and challenging our community. And until then, I'm Steve Pleich for Voice from the Village. Good night.